Topic: Support and transport in plants, secondary growth, transpiration, wilting, and guttation. Aims of lesson. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define basic terminology, such as etc., secondary growth, transpiration, wilting, guttation, etc. A label drawing of cross-sections through the plant root and stem. Know the distribution of different tissues in the root and stem. Know the structure of cells in different tissues. Know and understand the process of secondary growth, including annual rings. Know the process of transpiration and the factors affecting the rate of transpiration. Interpret experiments/investigations on the effects of temperature, light intensity, wind, and humidity on the rate of transpiration. Differentiate between wilting and guttation. Introduction. You have studied cell structure and the functions of the different organelles in grade 9 and in term 1 in grade 10. You have studied the concept of a tissue as a group of similar cells that are adapted for a particular function in grade 10. I revised the structure of the plant leaf as an organ in lesson 1. Concepts and skills. Below are definitions of some of the terms that you will study under this section. Use your textbook and underline all the new terms/words that you encounter while studying through the section on support and transport in plants. Use the glossary in your textbook to define these new terms/words. Note, at least 2 marks are awarded if you can define a term correctly in a test or examination. Root hair, unicellular epidermal outgrowths that increases the absorption surface of the root. Cambium, layer of meristematic tissue between the xylem and phloem of the stem. Fascicular cambium, cambium in the vascular bundles of dicotyledonous stems. Transpiration, loss of water vapor through the aerial parts of a plant, especially through the stomata. Wilting, condition which occurs when a plant loses more water through transpiration than what the roots can absorb. Guttation, process when water droplets are forced through the hydothodes on the edge of leaves. Internal structure of a root. When the cross-section of a young dicotyledonous root, refer to diagram below, is studied, 3 regions can be distinguished, i.e. the epidermis, cortex, and the central cylinder. The epidermis forms the outer layer of the root and contain finger-like outgrowths, the root hairs. The cortex consists of parenchyma cells with large intercellular air spaces. The innermost layer of the cortex consists of a single layer of cells called the endodermis. The radial and transverse walls of the endodermis contain thickened strips known as the Casparian strips. The central cylinder. Under the epidermis, there are thin-walled cells called the pericycle. On the inside of the pericycle is the vascular tissue that consists of xylem and phloem. Internal structure of a stem. When the cross-section of a young dicotyledonous stem, refer to diagram below, is studied, 3 regions can be distinguished, i.e. the epidermis, cortex, and the central cylinder. The epidermis forms the outer layer of the stem. The cortex consists of collenchyma, parenchyma, and endodermis. The central cylinder, xylem and phloem occur in vascular bundles in the stem. The xylem is on the inside and the phloem on the outside. A layer of meristematic tissue, the cambium, occurs between the xylem and phloem. Cambium makes secondary thickening possible. The central region of the stem is the pith and consists of parenchyma cells. Activity 1. Use your textbook and study the functions of the different tissues in the root and the stem. Secondary thickening. Stems of dicotyledonous plants grow in thickness as the plant gets older. This is known as secondary growth. Refer to the diagram of cross-section through a dicotyledonous stem and the diagram above. The cambium that occurs in the vascular bundles of dicotyledonous stems between the xylem and the phloem is known as fascicular cambium. The layer of parenchyma cells in the medullary rays between the vascular bundles become meristematic and are known as interfascicular cambium. The fascicular and interfascicular cambium join with each other to form a ring of cambium tissue. Mitosis takes place in the cambium ring. A new xylem tissue known as secondary xylem is formed towards the inside, and new phloem tissue known as secondary phloem forms towards the outside. The secondary xylem forms a continuous ring on the inside of the cambium ring, and the secondary phloem forms a continuous ring on the outside. Each year, the cambium forms a new ring of secondary xylem and secondary phloem. The original/primary xylem and original/primary phloem are pushed further away from each other. This causes the stem to become thicker. Annual rings. Study the diagrams of annual rings in your textbook. Annual rings are concentric rings that are visible in a cross-section of a woody, dicotyledonous stem. These rings are the secondary xylem and are known as annual rings. Each annual ring consists of two parts, i.e. a broad light-colored part, spring wood, and a narrow dark-colored part, autumn wood. During the spring, growth occurs faster because the conditions are favorable and the band of spring wood is wider. During autumn, growth occurs slower because the conditions are less favorable and the band of autumn wood is narrower. The age of a tree can be determined by counting the annual. Transpiration. Transpiration is the loss of water vapor through the aerial parts of the plant, mainly through the stomata. Relationship between water loss and the structure of a leaf. The smaller the leaves, the smaller the surface area for evaporation. Thorns and hairs on a leaf limit transpiration. Leaves with stomata, mainly on the lower side of the leaf, or leaves with sunken stomata, will limit transpiration. External factors influencing transpiration. High temperatures increase the rate of transpiration. A higher light intensity will increase the rate of transpiration. High humidity will decrease the rate of transpiration. Wind will increase the rate of transpiration. Wilting. Wilting occurs when a plant loses more water through transpiration than the roots can absorb. Guttation. When the transpiration rate is slower or even stops, the plant absorbs more water than what is lost. Water droplets are forced out through small openings called hydothodes on the edges of leaves. This is called guttation. Know the meaning of instructional verbs in test and examination questions, e.g. Instructional verb. Meaning. Name. Give the name of something. Differentiate. Use differences to qualify between two or more categories. Tabulate. Draw a table and indicate the answers as direct pairs. Describe. State in sentences the main points of a process. Explain. Give your answer in a cause-effect or statement and reason sequence. Compare. Give similarities and differences between concepts. Answer the following questions. Question 1. Discuss the diameter of the internal structure of a dicotyledonous root and stem by referring to the arrangement of cells in the three regions present. Question 2. Study the diagram below of a cross-section through the stem of a plant. 2.1 Identify the parts numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 2.2 State the function of the following parts. A. 4. B. 5. 2.3. What type of cells occupy region numbered 6? Question 3. The stem of a woody 6-year-old tree, which was planted in 2009, was cut and the width of the spring and autumn wood in each annual ring was measured to determine secondary growth. 3.1 What is meant by the following terms? A. Secondary growth. B. Spring wood. 3.2 What was the total secondary growth of the stem? Show all your working. 3.3 What was the average annual secondary growth over the period? Show all your working. 3.4 Draw a line graph to show the growth of the springwood from 2009 to 2014. Expanded activities. Question 4. Study the table below that illustrates the rate of water absorption by roots and the rate of transpiration by leaves. 4.1 Draw two line graphs on the same system of axis to illustrate the results in the table. 4.2 Name two environmental factors that could influence the rate of water loss. 4.3 Use the information in the table to state the time when the sun rises. 4.4 When does maximum transpiration take place? Question 5. Study the diagram below and answer the questions that follow. 5.1 State the aim of the above experiment. 5.2 Give the name of the apparatus illustrated above. 5.3 How can the air bubble be moved from B to A? 5.4 Give two external factors that will cause the air bubble to move quickly from B to A. 5.5 Explain four precautionary measures that should be taken into consideration when setting up the apparatus. Common errors made by learners in examinations. Not familiar with basic terminology. Do not understand instructional verb /s in a question, e.g. the difference between describe and explain. And not able to provide correct labels to drawings /illustrations. Do not know the structure and functions of tissues in the stem and root. Cannot interpret questions on practical work. Activities /assessment. Complete the activities /questions on the sections on the root, stem, transpiration, wilting, and guttation in your textbook. Consolidation. Define all the terminology relevant to the topic /s covered in this lesson. Label and draw diagrams of the cross-sections through the root and stem. Try to complete expanded activities. Note: the knowledge and skills gained in this section will help you to have a better understanding of the following sections that you still need to deal with, i.e. uptake and transport of water and minerals in plants. Values. By studying and learning about plants, you will develop a deep appreciation of the importance of plant conservation, as humans and animals are dependent on plants for their survival.